Welcome to the Explainer. So, today we've got a very specific mission. We're going to completely demystify the path to true English fluency. Look, if you're someone who feels perpetually stuck in that frustrating intermediate plateau, where you can understand almost everything you hear on Netflix, but then you completely freeze up the second you actually have to talk to a barista, well, you are in exactly the right place. This plateau, it's a known neurological bottleneck. Pushing past it requires some entirely new tactics. So we're going to break down the science and the absolute latest strategies from top language educators to completely transform how you practice.
To kick things off, let me ask you something right off the bat. Do you actually need to pack up your entire life and move to London or New York to get fluent? I mean, for decades, we've been sold this traditional, incredibly expensive assumption that moving abroad is the one and only golden ticket to true language immersion. The industry basically tells us that without a plane ticket, we're just doomed to mediocrity. But what if that's completely wrong? What if the actual geography of your physical body matters way less than the focus of your brain?
Well, take a look at this paradigm-shifting truth from Conjuro English. Immersion is not a place, it's a behavior. Here's the truly fascinating neurological reality of this. Your brain literally doesn't know the difference between listening to a conversation in a loud, crowded coffee shop in New York and listening to a podcast of that exact same conversation right from your living room sofa. Necessity just isn't geographical. Honestly, you could move to London tomorrow and easily live your whole life in an expat bubble without ever speaking a single word of English. True immersion is completely in your control, right from your phone. It all starts with modifying your daily behaviors, not your physical location. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the exact step-by-step master guide we're going to use to rebuild your English routine from the ground up. Number 1, the immersion myth. Number 2, the 80-20 output rule. Number 3, master the core 1,000. Number 4, the shadowing method. And finally, number 5, your 30-day roadmap. Starting with section 1, the immersion myth. Your home is the classroom. Because that whole traditional study first, speak later model, that is officially dead in 2026. Moving to section 2, the 80-20 output rule, language as a fitness routine. You see, mastering a language is actually way more like building muscle memory than studying a textbook. Experts at Ingvarda hit the nail on the head here. Mastering English isn't like cramming for a history exam. It's exactly like hitting the gym. Just look at the stark contrast between input mode and output mode. That frustrating fluency gap exists because most learners spend like 80% of their time in passive input mode, reading books, watching movies, just listening. And sure, while input absolutely builds comprehension, it honestly does zero for your physical speaking ability. The modern standard for rapid growth completely flips this. You need to spend 80% of your time in active output mode. Why? Because forcing your brain to retrieve vocabulary under pressure and actually physically produce sound is the absolute only way to break that dreaded mental translation barrier. You know the one where you think of a concept in your native language and desperately try to translate it word for word into English before you even open your mouth? Active output forces you to bypass that middle step entirely. Which brings us to section 3, master the core 1,000, the efficiency hack. Because you might be wondering, with all this active output, what exactly should we be practicing? Let me ask you, how many words do you actually think you need to know to be considered fluent? 10,000? 20,000? Nope. The answer is just 1,000. That's it. 1,000. According to the research-backed Instant Words list highlighted by Prep Edu, you do not need some massive, overwhelming dictionary in your head to communicate effectively and clearly. Mastering just the 1,000 most common English words is literally the ultimate efficiency hack for your learning journey. It strips away all that intimidation and lets you hyper-focus your energy on the vocabulary that actually moves the needle in your daily life. And the data here reveals this massive aha moment. To put this into perspective, just the first 300 most common words make up approximately 65% of all printed English text. The first 100 words alone make up half, 50%. Just think about the immense relief that brings. You don't need to memorize obscure adjectives or highly technical nouns right out of the gate. By focusing exclusively on these high-frequency core words, you're covering the vast majority of everyday conversations without spreading your brainpower way too thin on words you'll use maybe once a year. This frees up your cognitive load so you can actually focus on your pronunciation, your rhythm, and your flow, instead of constantly searching for the perfect complex word.
All right, section 4, the shadowing method, training your brain in real time. So how do we actually put this core vocabulary into practice so we sound natural without overthinking the whole shebang?
Enter the shadowing method. This is a brilliant four-step method beautifully articulated by speaker Moniba Mazzari, and you can think of it as your daily living room workout. Step 1 is deep listen. Pick a short 30-second audio clip, and don't just treat it like background noise. Give it your absolute undivided attention. Step 2 is absorb. Really notice the rhythm, those deliberate pauses, and the emotion hidden between the words. Step 3 is echo. Push yourself to respond instantly to what you hear, following the audio closely, literally like a shadow follows light. And finally, step 4 is speak. Repeat what you hear out loud without stopping to judge yourself or correct every tiny mistake. By deeply listening and echoing that emotion, your brain actually stops translating and starts imitating natively. Now, as you consistently practice the shadowing, Envarta recommends pushing through 3 distinct phases of thinking in English. Phase 1 is labeling your world. Look at a chair in your room and immediately just think chair, actively bypassing your native language. Phase 2 is the internal monologue. Literally start arguing with yourself or, making your grocery decisions entirely in English in your head. And phase 3? Well, phase 3 is removing the safety net. Yep, this means doing the truly terrifying thing and turning off those AI-generated subtitles on your favorite Netflix shows. I know, it's scary. But you have to force your brain into that momentary panic, because that struggle, that desperate attempt to understand context through tone and body language, is exactly where the real neurological growth actually happens. Let's move to our final section and see how this all builds together. Section 5, your 30-day roadmap, the fluency blueprint. Let's turn all of this theory into a highly actionable execution plan. Chronologically, your month is going to look exactly like this. Week 1 is your foundation. This is where you focus purely on basic phonetics, getting used to the physical sound of your own voice in a new language, and basically shedding that initial speech anxiety. Week 2 scales up into vocabulary. You'll learn contextually and practice describing your exact daily routines. Week 3 introduces professional polish. Here, you refine your impact, your clarity, and you start naturally handling those more complex grammatical structures without pausing. And finally, week 4 is total immersion, where you aggressively combine listening, reading, writing, and intense speaking to push for a genuine, undeniable fluency breakthrough. So if we break that timeline down into daily, bite-sized tasks, drawing from some incredibly effective strategies by Lingua Marina and platforms like TalkPal, here's exactly what you do. Start at day 0 by taking a baseline test and setting one highly specific goal. Then, every single day, enforce a strict 15-minute speaking rule. You can use language exchange apps to speak completely anonymously if you're shy, but you absolutely must speak out loud. Scientifically, consistent 15-minute daily bursts build far more resilient neural pathways than some exhausting 3-hour marathon study session on a Sunday. Add in one daily TED Talk for your shadowing practice. Then, on day 30, take a final assessment to definitively prove to yourself just how much ground you have covered. As we wrap up this core analysis, I want to leave you with this incredibly powerful emotional note from Moniba Mazzari. Fluency is not about perfection, it is about permission. And honestly, this strikes right at the heart of the whole issue. The biggest barrier keeping you stuck on that intermediate plateau isn't a lack of vocabulary, and it's certainly not a misunderstanding of grammar rules. It is simply the paralyzing fear of making a mistake. Giving yourself permission to try, to stumble, to sound silly, to mispronounce a word, and to just rise again, that is the absolute true secret to speaking confidently. You have to be willing to be bad at it before you can be great at it. So I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought. What does your day 1 start with today? Are you going to turn off those subtitles tonight and actually embrace the struggle? Will you start labeling your room in English right now? The power to get fluent isn't waiting for you in another country, guys. It is already right there in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now go out there and start speaking.